What is good, everybody? Hello, 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 hello. Happy Momentum Monday. I have clapping. I have a fun word. So, this word has three different tools or ways that you can look at your inner life so that you can actually approach your outer life differently. I have found from my own life experience and also working with many clients that a lot of times we fixate on the external to help us feel some kind of way, or we try to get people to act some kind of way, or behave some kind of way, or start doing something or stop doing something so that we'll finally feel happy or content or whatever it is that we're going after, without recognizing that a lot of what makes us frustrated, a lot of what makes us kind of wrestle on the inside, we are creating. Okay. A lot of, and nobody likes to hear this, but there's so much freedom when you actually can understand this, can recognize this, and can also start doing the real inner work to change things that need to change within you. Okay. So the first example that I have, number one, is called the manual. Now, the manual is something that you have for yourself. It's your own set of operating procedures, if you will, standards for how you show up, morals, values, things that are acceptable, things that are totally unacceptable, negotiable, non-negotiable. There's standards, there's ways that you operate that sometimes, because you operate that way, you expect everybody around you to get it and to just operate the same way as well. Okay. And when they don't, there's some like passive aggression and so all sorts of crazy things that can happen when you feel violated, like they didn't read the manual. So here's the thing. Not only do we have this manual for ourselves, but we have this manual for how we expect people to show up in our world. It could be a partner, it could be a child, it could be a boss, it could be a friend, it could be a parent, it could be a mother-in-law, a brother-in-law, whatever it might be. We have expectations for how these people are supposed to operate in our lives. However, we don't often communicate or share that manual. Right? It's like we are upset that somebody didn't read the manual, that they don't know how to show up when they encounter us, right? But the only thing that we're actually entitled to, it's not somebody's good behavior necessarily. We're entitled to however they show up, right? But we get to decide how we're going to show up. That's what we have control over. We can never control how somebody else is going to show up. And frankly, you're not going to want to. You would never want somebody to change their behavior just to make you happy. Somebody unwillingly changing themselves to make you happy is not authentic at all. And you don't want that. And you don't want to create that or perpetuate that in any kind of way. So the first challenge here is to think about the things that you expect other people to do. Have you communicated these things? Are they things that you just get upset about and start really impressing upon somebody else? Think about the manual that you have. I have a somewhat funny example of this. This is, just totally hypothetical, but here we go. So let's imagine that there's a couple, okay, and they can be married. Okay, so they're living together, they're married, and they have a dog, okay? Now, this dog does what a dog does. It goes in the backyard, it does its business. However, let's say the wife is not happy that the dog's business is just left in the backyard. Like, this needs to be picked up so that it's not stepped on or doesn't turn into a bigger mess, or, it's not good. Like, I don't want this built up in my yard. That's one partner, that's the wife, right? Let's say that the husband doesn't care, right? It's a dog. Just let him outside. Let him do what he's going to do. Not a big deal. It's not going to bother me. It's not going to ruin my day. I'm not going to give it any energy, right? So the wife is upset that the husband is not understanding why this is a big deal, right? Like, you should get that this should not be the case. Like, we should both value that there shouldn't be all this business in the backyard. However, not only is there mess in the backyard, but now there's mess in between them because the wife can't let it go, and she's upset that the husband is not on the same wavelength and that he's not doing anything to clean up the business in the backyard, right? So rather than constantly getting upset that the husband is not going to get on the same page, rather than making it a big deal and letting that bring mess into the relationship dynamics, what this wife has the opportunity to do is tear up the manual, the unspoken and maybe sometimes spoken expectation that this man is supposed to clean up because I see it as a value, I see it as a need, he needs to also, right? So the thing is, if she rips up the manual, she might be the one that's cleaning up the mess all the time, okay? But she would be the one doing it anyway, with or without him, because that is her standard. That's what she wants. That's what she needs. So she's going to keep doing it. Now, if she would just do that and keep doing that and be unbothered about whether he's on the same wavelength or not, he might actually start doing it. Who knows? But even if he doesn't, then it's not the end of the world. And there's not all of this resentment and all this frustration building up over something that she thinks would be nice and would appreciate if this other person would do. With me? So I know that that's kind of like a silly example. Maybe it's real for somebody, but here's the thing. When we have these expectations of other people, we can totally operate in this black or white thinking or this all or nothing thinking, and we can ruin our day just being so caught up in frustration and resentment and like, right? When really, if you're just clear on what it is that you want, that you need, and that you do something about it, you take action and keep showing up for your highest and best self, then it doesn't matter how that person shows up, and you just give them permission to do what they're going to do, because ultimately you can't control them either way. And you don't want to give your power away, and you don't want to give all of your energy away ultimately to something that doesn't matter. With me? So number one, think about the manual that you have for yourself, because sometimes we keep doing things when really we don't want to be doing them anyway. It's not what we value. Maybe we got that pattern or that habit from our family of upbringing. Maybe we got it from, the education system we went through. Maybe we got it from somewhere or something we were exposed to, but maybe that doesn't fit into what we expect of ourselves. Maybe that doesn't fit into our lifestyle or how we're inspired to show up anymore. So evaluate the manual that you have for yourself. Perfectionism is a really great example. A lot of times we're trained to seek that, but it can be so limiting and it can be so destructive, not only to our self-expression, our communication, our creativity, our well-being. So maybe that's something that no longer fits who you are. And are you willing to tear up the manual that tells you you've got to look and be and show up this kind of way, right? Now, also consider the manual that you have with other people and just experiment with this, right? What if you didn't make a big deal how somebody showed up or not? What if you didn't always really turn that into something and you just took care of what you needed to take care of without expecting them to show up or to get it or to read your mind or all of that? Experiment with the manual. Number two is different, because this actually has to do with what happens when somebody does actually violate your space, okay? And really is threatening in a sense. Threatening is a strong word, but somebody is infringing upon your mental health, your emotional health in a negative way. Then number two is boundaries. A boundary needs to be enforced. Now, we don't just go around slinging boundaries, right? Just to make sure that somebody knows how to deal with us, right? Or knows how to handle us well, right? It's not what we do. A lot of times we use wisdom, we use discernment, but when somebody is violating your space, right? They're actually coming into your space and violating your space, then you can't expect them to read your mind. You can't expect them to get it. You can't even expect them to respect it and honor it consistently. But what you can expect is that you are going to set the boundary. You're going to communicate it from love, right? You're also then going to follow up with the consequence when necessary, right? It's not fair to sling a boundary that somebody doesn't know about and then get upset with them for not meeting the boundary. That kind of falls into the manual, right? So with the boundary, an example of this could be another hypothetical here. Let's say there is, somebody that keeps coming over to your house. They just come over and they walk into your house. This could be like a mother-in-law, right? Okay, so mother-in-law keeps coming over uninvited, and that actually messes with your whole vibe. It messes with you focusing on what you need to focus on, getting work done, taking care of the kids, whatever's going on, right? So rather than continuing to allow that, because that does affect you. It affects you mentally, it affects you emotionally, it affects your presence, it affects you, right? So rather than going along with it and having the mother-in-law think that it's okay and just continuing this dynamic, you can communicate to mother-in-law and say, I enjoy seeing you. I do appreciate and just really celebrate our relationship. It's so valuable in my life. However, it has become stressful for me every time you come over and I don't know that you're going to come over. So in the future, I'd appreciate it if you give me a call so I can let you know if it's a good time or not. I might be in the middle of something, so I can just really let you know if it's a good time or not, or we can schedule a time. If you're not able to do that, I understand, but I am going to have to lock my door. So I don't want you to be surprised then if you find that the door is locked and I may or may not answer it. Okay, now that is setting the boundary, and enforcing the boundary would be if the mother-in-law keeps coming, you've got to lock the door and decide not to answer it. And she might not like it, but that's okay, right? People will continue to get away with what they can, right? And what they think is okay. And if it's not okay for you, you need to communicate that. I will say, when enforcing boundaries, it is not the time to do it when you're not in a place of peace, when you are in a really angry or frustrated place, when you're not coming from love, when you're trying to prove a point. These are never times to enforce boundaries. You always want to do it from love, and it's not a bad thing. You taking care of you and your health and what you want and what you need is important. So that's number 2. Think about, are there any areas of your life where you're continuing to let frustration and resentment, all of this stuff build up inside of you, right? And this person thinks it's good and you're just smiling, but on the inside you're like seething, right? And like this angry hot mess. Not okay. Not okay. It should never get to that point, right? So you need to put things in place so it doesn't get to that point. With me? Okay, so think about your life, and if there's any areas where you need to enforce a boundary. Is there any area where you're being violated, or what are the areas where you need to be aware of so that you're prepared to set those boundaries when the time may come? Not that you're looking out for it, but just to be clear on what you need, and particularly where you are in this season. You know, we don't always have energy to give everybody. Sometimes you need to give every extra ounce of energy that you have to yourself, depending on how much you're pouring out. So it's really important to evaluate what you can and can't handle in this season, so you're aware of where boundaries may need to be set. And then lastly, number 3 is everything to do with this entire message, but really getting to answering that question: are you an approval addict? Because if you are, 1 and 2 are going to feel very difficult at the onset to change, but the freedom and the power and the wholeness, whew, and the breath of breath there really that you step into is phenomenal. Okay. We become approval addicts usually early on in our life. We're trained to follow the rules, to follow instructions, to make our parents happy, to make our teachers happy. We are trained to show up in some kind of way or present some version of ourselves so that this person will be okay with us and that they'll approve of whatever is going on with us. However, that is not always healthy, and you shouldn't have to be showing up in all of these different versions of yourself and losing yourself, right? So here's the thing. A lot of times we don't recognize that whether somebody thinks highly of us or negatively of us, very poorly of us, that has actually nothing to do with us at all. It has everything to do with them and what's going on inside of them. So for example, if they like something about us, it's really highlighting a trait or a quality that they like in themselves or one that they want to work on. Or if they hate something in us, it's doing the same thing. It's triggering that part of themselves that they don't like, right? So rather than look at that, rather than go within and reflect or do the work to change that or whatever it might be, they would rather resent and like hate on you. With me? So it actually has nothing to do with you, but it has everything to do with what's going on in them. Okay. So when you think about that, another example is how people show up on social media. They're trained to do something to get the engagement or to post something provocative in order to draw attention to them or to whatever it is, right? However, that person might not like doing any of that at all. And their real win would be them giving themselves approval to show up the way they feel led to. With me? And letting the people that like them come to them, letting the people that don't like them do what they're going to do too, right? But you have space for people to criticize you. in your life, right? Like, think about it. Do you have space in your life for people to not approve of who you are, to have a criticism, to have an opinion about you, right? Or are you going to make that a thing, right? Because when somebody has an opinion of us, it's only a problem when we agree with it and when we believe it and when we make it something bigger than it needs to be, right? So if you don't put extra weight on whether somebody likes you or not, you can give yourself permission to show up and be authentically who you are and live as you're inspired to live, one day at a time and one moment at a time. So with this one, if you find that you are just trying to do things to make other people happy, that you keep showing up in these different versions of you to make sure that they perceive you some kind of way, to make sure that you always get this one side of them, you will be in this cycle of running your entire life. What you can do is pause and ask yourself, what does it look like to approve of me? How would I show up differently if I fully approved of myself? What if I didn't need approval outside of me at all, right? What if everything that I needed to change my life was on the inside of me? What if I thought about it like this? What if I was committed to feeling the way I feel, but actually reflecting on that and deciding how it is that I want to feel and taking care of myself rather than expecting somebody else to show up some kind of way to make me feel some kind of way, right? Ultimately, we have no control over what's going on in somebody's mind. They can even tell us exactly what they're thinking, exactly how they're feeling. You could be thinking and feeling something totally different. We'd have no idea, right? You can have wisdom, you can have discernment, so you might have some sense, but ultimately, we can't control what is going on the inside of somebody else, and that is none of our business. So the key here is to start taking responsibility for your business and be accountable to you. How do you want to think? How do you want to feel? How do you want to show up in the world? Not how should you show up to make this person feel some kind of way, not what should you do to get this kind of reaction out of somebody? It's how do you want to show up? How do you want to feel? And what can you do to take care of that? That's on you. That's actually not up to anybody else at all. So I want to encourage you with on today as you think about your week ahead here and building momentum that you want to ride on throughout the week. Explore these three things, whether you need to look at one of them or all of them. What are these unspoken expectations that you're living by or that you're expecting other people to live up to? Perhaps it's time to tear up the manual and do what you're led to do and let people off the hook. Just give them permission to be who they are, and you do who you are, so that you're not wasting all this extra time and energy trying to manipulate or control or enforce an outcome. 2, if somebody is violating a boundary, that's time. That's a signal to you. That discomfort is a signal to you that you need to enforce a boundary and that you need to uphold the consequence, right? If somebody is okay treating you some kind of way, but it's not okay for you, you need to communicate that, and there needs to be a consequence. Otherwise, it will keep happening and you will be frustrated. You will be let down. You'll build up this resentment. It can destroy the relationship rather than changing the dynamics of the relationship in a healthy and progressive way. Then lastly, number 3 is if you recognize that you are in fact an approval addict, that's how you're motivated, that's how you're wired, that's how you show up every day, give yourself time and permission to not have to do that at all. Set dates with yourself on the calendar where you can journal, where you can do some self-reflection. Have environments and things that you can do in your life where you're not doing it except for the pure enjoyment of it, whether that's some sort of creative expression, photography, film, art, painting, whatever it is, but have things in your life where you're not doing it for anybody else. You're just doing it because you enjoy it. And practice just giving yourself permission to show up and be who you are. Because the more you do that, the more you actually find your people and the more you care less about what other people disapprove of. If you approve of it, you don't care how somebody feels, whether they like it or not. So think about these things, and I'm curious to know which one or all 3 you're going to work on. Let me know in the comments below. If you've not subscribed to the YouTube channel, make sure you do that. That's how you can get these pop-up words as they come. And then as far as staying connected, I will put the information below in this video in the description. And the best place to visit to really get to all the things is julianapage.com, and also the Spirit-Filled Real Talk podcast, wherever you get your podcasts. All right, guys, I hope this message blessed you. And until next time, stay blessed.